guys, welcome inside the stash. This is going to be a multi-part series on one of my favorite racing subjects, the Japanese Touring Car Championship Series, formerly known as just the JTC for the Japanese Touring Car. Probably a lot of people recognize the abbreviation JTCC a little bit more since it tends to be on boxes of various kits over the years, where they added the actual championship part to the Japanese touring car name in the I would say about the mid 1990s when it officially became JTCC. We're going to break this into, like I said, several different videos just for size purposes. We will go over just basically all of the kits that are available, some of the aftermarket decals that are available. You guys know that I'm a very big fan of this racing series, of the releases and reissues of the various kits. So, if nothing else, you get to sort of see a little bit of what I have in a condensed sort of way. Since it's all spread out of, this in the box, that in the box. Some of this stuff has never actually, I don't think, ever been shown. It's just stuff I've either had or things that I, acquired in the years prior to the show, this channel on YouTube ever being a thing. There are some kits that I actually don't have. I know, right? Can you believe it? And then at the end, we'll take a sort of a future look at the things that are either, right on the cusp of release, and sort of speculate a little bit more in the future of where we think perhaps some of the existing tooling that we know about anyway could head in terms of fulfilling more of the gaps that are in the JTCC realm universe. Now, so to say, what do they call Marvel universe? What's missing out of the JTCC racing universe, as it were? Now, why am I starting like here as opposed to, say, AJTCC, which is the Japanese Grand Touring Car, which was where the GTRs and ultimately, this is where all of your Tamiya kits tend to be. Your NSXs, both the old version and the new version, the Nissan R34, R33 GTRs, the Z, when they changed the car to the 350Z for a couple years, then the 2008 GTR, what we normally call the R35, even though technically not there is no R35 GTR. That's just sort of a one of those things you say because it was the next generation, but there is no technical R35. The R32, the R30 through the R34 were actually designated that as sort of their generational call out. There is no real R35 because when the R35 became what we call the Nissan GTR now from 2008 to present, it's no longer based on the Skyline chassis. The Skyline is a four-door family car now. The GTR is obviously a purpose-built supercar, and it's not, but that's just mincing words on the R35 part. It's just one of those things. But at any rate, all those cars went on to become, of course, Super GT. Now, there is a plethora of kits available for both the early days of JGTC and Super GT, and perhaps in the future we'll do a series on those kits. There's a wild amount of liveries also available for those kits, especially out of Shunko from about 2005 going up to about 2014. However, the thing with a lot of the Super GT stuff is, if you want to use those liveries for years that don't correspond to the years that the cars were actually released, say the Lexus the Lexus SC Super GT kit is a 2005, actually 2006. The Honda NSX is a 2005. The Nissan GTR R35 is a 2008. So in order to use the liveries that exist for like the 2006 to 2012 Lexus liveries, the 2008 to 2014 GTR liveries, the 2006 through 2009 NSX liveries, you require a number of things to be done to the body if you want to correctly represent what they are. Now, you could just throw the decals on, from a later year onto an early model without changing it, and 99% of people will never know that it's not right, but you'll know it's wrong. So because of that necessity, if you will, of having to constantly update older kits to newer body pieces. There are a number of magazines available. I think I've shown them on the channel at one point in time. I got a bunch of them out of Japan that really will go very in-depth into dictating exactly what changes were made to the body year to year. And it's certainly a fantastic photo reference to have if you are someone like me who at some point in the future would like to attempt to update some of the bodies so I can use some of those other liveries. You know, those resources exist. But the JTCC stuff, because it was so, you know, was Group A basically, and Group A was as close to factory stock racing that existed other than perhaps Group N, which was a, you know, an endurance type, very, very close to factory stock racing series that ran primarily in Japan. This was as close as you could get to these cars not needing a lot of modifications. You can make pretty much everything I'm going to talk about in this series of videos without doing a lot to the kits, other than maybe adding some decals in to represent certain years worth of liveries. And in some cases, like in the, from say 1990, when the R32 GTR came, until 1993, which would be its last year in touring before it would jump into and become run JGTC for 1 year, and then the R33 would come out. Those kits require you to pay attention to what sets of wheels the kits come with. Sometimes you need to buy a specific Tamiya R32 specifically for a set of wheels rather than for the actual set of decals itself. But anyway, so we're going to take this, like I said, from the very beginning. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. You know, known as Japanese touring car within Japan. Also, probably, you know, known by its full name, being AJTCC, the All Japan Touring Car Championship Series. Would come out of Group 5 regulations. Group 5 regulations, of course, ran from the early 1980s to the mid-1980s. Things like the BMW 320, the Porsche 935 Kremers, the Mercury Capri. There was a number of these kits. Tommy did several, did a couple, I should say, the Mercury Capri, and there's also did one of the Toyota Group 5 cars. Those were older kits, curbside motorized things. They've been updated slightly through the years for different liveries and things like that. But really, the Porsche 935 K2 is the first one of the Group 5 regulation cars that's come out that is a new tool representing a modern take on those things. Be interested to see if more of those come along. Obviously, racing from, say, the late 1970s through the mid-1990s is very, very hot right now through all of its genres and all of its series. But, as I said, 1985 it all started within the JTC. Primarily, you had, at the very, very beginning, a bunch of Toyota Corolla 11s. The Corolla 11 was something that was already racing within the Group 5 regulations, and Toyota was able to just basically strip off all of those crazy wings and ground effects and race a very close to factory stock vehicle in Group A. These would follow on with also the Mitsubishi Starions, which we got here as the Chrysler Conquest, and a couple other cars here and there would filter in that weren't very popular. One of the kits and one of the cars that did come along that was one of the foreign invasion of JTCC in the early years would be the BMW 635. Now, there are a number of these kits available. Now, the Tamiya kits aren't readily available, and really neither is the Fujimi kit at this point. These ones, for some reason, tend to be cheaper if you buy them in Japan than the Jägermeister version, although the two cars are effectively the same, other than the fact that the Jägermeister version is molded in orange. These cars, which represent, I believe it's supposed to be the 1985, I can't see if I can find a year on these, copyright year, 86. You're supposed to represent, I believe, the 1985 24 Hours of Spa BMW factory team, the Schnitzer Racing team. These are all molded in white. Chances are the decals in these are going to be shot. But that's okay because you don't need these decals anyway. You just need the base kit. The BMW 635 would, race for 2 years in JTC in 1985 and 1986. I believe there were also 1 or 2 fielded in the very, very beginning of 1987. But the rules were changing within JTC over those times to make it not so much more Japanese-centric, but the regulations on weight and power and things like that would come into effect in the later 1980s. And that would actually split JTC up into 3 different divisions based on displacement and weight. The BMWs were very, very fast in 1985. This car, the 635, would win the 1985 JTC title, its championship, with Japanese drivers. It would then not do so well in 1986. It would then, as I said, basically flounder out in 1987 as things like the R30 Nissan Skyline and the Mitsubishi Starion would really take hold, and you would get these 2-cylinder inline-4 cars that would actually be, because of their weight, much faster than the heavier Group A, big BMW. Huge advantage based on power and everything when it came out of Group A racing in Europe into Japan. That advantage did not last very long. So there is, like I said, 1 set of decals for this for 1985. I'm going to throw a picture of the real car up on the screen that I screenshotted off a YouTube video, which when I get done with all of this, I will link up because it is a great reference of just sort of the first 10 years or so of JTC history. And that is this STP livery. This STP livery is available from Studio 27. It is a current print, meaning that it is available. Actually, they just reissued these for September, so if you can't find them, they will be back shortly. And it's a pretty basic livery scheme where pretty much all of the striping that you saw on the layout is on the decal itself. This race, as you see here, is for the Intertech race. The Intertech race was run primarily at the last race of the season, but was run at Fuji Speedway. In 1985, it was the last race of the season, and in other years, it would be the next to the last race of the season. And the Intertech thing was the International Touring Car Championship, where they invited drivers from Europe and outside of Japan specifically to race in the series. This car would not win the Intertech that year. We'll get to that in a second. But it would, like I said, be the championship car. And this livery is the livery it ran for the entire year. In 1985, the winning car for the Intertech series is actually something that just became available not too terribly long ago. It's the Volvo 240 Turbo. This is that new toolkit from BMAX that came out last year, or I should say earlier this year. Now, while the box art here does depict the 1986 Gear Race of Macau winning car, livery included in this kit allows you to build the car that actually did win the 1985 Intertech, and that is the Eggenberger Motorsports, which is also what the Macau car is, but it is the Eggenberger Motorsports Volvo. It's a much more subdued livery than the Kamachi Kasaki City livery, obviously, but this car and its team cars, 21 and a 22, would win the race. The Intertech here would podium in 3rd. But, like I said, overall, with Nagasaka and Mogi would be your winning championship car. So you can build with 3 of these kits, 2 of these, 1 635, you can build effectively the podium for the Fuji Intertech race in 1985. Whoop, that's an 86 decal. In 1985. There we go. So that would be basically where you're at in 1985 land. So in 1986, you would continue to have the BMW 635 entered. It would continue on with a slightly different livery. You see here you've got a red and blue instead of the 2 tones of blue. Something a little more to the NASCAR STP livery. The decals are pretty much still the same in the sense that you paint the car white and the decals to everything else. The drivers remained the same. They were a carryover into 1986. This specific decal sheet makes, again, the Intertech race, which was the next to last race in 1986. They didn't do particularly well in that race at all, and overall, considering they had won the championship series in 1985, you start seeing that power to weight ratio come into play in terms of the new R30 Skyline, the RS Turbo, which is, obviously turbocharged 4-cylinder at that point. Or it actually may have been a turbocharged 6 in there. I'd have to go look up the exact way that car was raced. But that car ended up being lighter and faster than the BMW. So this 635, as it comes in this decal sheet, finished second in the first race of the season and third in the last race of the season. The rest of the season, they didn't have such a good positioning, just simply from the fact that, again, the cars were so much heavier than their competition, and the power to weight thing really started to affect them. The other option that you have for 1986 is a little more obscure, but the decals do exist for it, is this. This is, of course, the venerable Jaguar XJS TWR race car from Hasegawa. This represents the 1984 European Touring Car Championship. I think it's supposed to technically be the 24 Hours of Spa car. Let's see. Yep, 24 Hours of Spa car. Now, in 1985, Jaguar sidestepped out of Group A, and Tom Waukesha would then start running the Rover Vitesse, which would be a great kit should BMAX ever be looking to do something for European Touring Car, as well as their Gia Racing Macau stuff that they like to do. But Tom Waukesha Racing kept their Jaguars. They didn't actually get rid of them. And with a few things going on, he decided he was going to bring the cars back out to race in Australia, and of course the Gia Racing Macau and a couple other things. And the 1986 Intertech would be the next to the last race for those Jaguars. They'd be brought out of, they were already over in, obviously, Australia, so they're already close to Japan. They were shipped to Japan for the Intertech race. They actually were leading the race for quite a while until they both suffered DNFs due to parts failures. And, it sort of goes down in an ignominious history for the cars. It, like I said, really just took off. It was, considering the power that these cars had in them from the European Touring Championship cars, it was like I said, ignominious way on the way out. They ran the Wellington 500 in New Zealand in 1986 as their absolute last race of the year. Unfortunately, again, not that great as finish. Now, the car you're going to see up on your screen is Tom Waukesha's car. They entered two of them, a 51 and a 52. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken here, I'm trying to figure out, without pulling the decal sheet out, who was in what car. I believe that, looking right here, Armin Hahn and Denny Hulme were in one car, and Tom Waukesha and Win Percy were in the other. But there's a sheet from Autocolor. Now, this sheet is technically out of production, although they may have made some more, because I wrote to them asking if they planned to make some more when the Jaguar kit was reissued, and they said they were. I personally have not gone to look for more of them because I already have a set that has what I want on it. Now, you could do 3 different cars out of this decal sheet. One is a European touring car from Donington in England in 1984. One is the 1984 Gia Racing Macau winning car, which is what these Johnny Player special decals are for. That was actually a black car. And then the other one is, like I said, the one on you saw on the screen there. So you have the 51 and 52 blocks and the Strathmore Group livery down here that go on the white stripes that run down both sides of the decal sheet. And you could build just something that's a little off the ordinary there, because again, really out of the chute for the first 6-10 laps of the race, completely and totally dominated the field. But then, unfortunately, I think the garage rot, if you will, sort of set in, and those cars both DNF'd. And then last thing we're going to cover real quick, because it is basically the last of the kits that were available, and one of the last cars that became available in 1986 was the Honda Civic SI. This car is a venerable Tamiya kit. It's one of the ones I don't have, so you got to just deal with the screenshot of the box art. This kit was available for a long time. It's not available right now. It's also not terribly hard, again, to find in Japan. It's one of those kits that we don't get a lot of here in the United States for whatever reason, but it just is a thing that exists in Japan. There's so many of them that were made over there. This car would actually win a number of races in 1986, or at least two of the races in 1986, over other faster cars. So this is when you started to see that displacement and weight thing come into balance. So you have the Mugen Civic Racing. Sometimes the decals on these kits can be somewhat dicey. Shunko did do a replacement set for this car, and sometimes those are kind of dicey to find as well. There are several available right now for some reason, all across the various auction sites. But, you know, it's one of those things. My suggestion to you would be to obtain the decals and then go find a kit rather than the other way around, because you never know how long you have to wait for a decently priced kit. For some reason, some people think this kit is worth more than $50, but it's a very, very basic curbside. Then there is a company called CMD, or 3MD, excuse me, 3MD Decals. And they made this livery you're seeing on screen now, which is the 1987 Honda Civic Si modal livery Civic. So this is obviously a different car number. It's a 16 rather than the 15. It's got the modal livery, which you guys will see in the next couple of videos, becomes a very, very famous livery throughout the rest of Honda's racing legacy, at least in the 1980s, and is the next step. There's nothing you need to do to the kit itself for 1987 other than change the livery. So again, it's another basic thing. Now, of course, you need to find two of these out-of-production Civics, technically speaking, but you know, not the worst thing in the world, I guess you could say, in terms of you know, all of that. So that pretty much wraps up this video. Like I said, just wanted to cover the very, very early basics of JTC. Let you know that it isn't all Japanese cars. Matter of fact, in the coming years, as we just start talking about the later 1980s, we have, of course, the entry into the series by what would become the very dominant race car of the middle to late 80s in the Tier 1 racing division, which would, of course, be the Group A RS500 Ford Sierra. This particular kit is the Trompio kit that would be your JTCC kit of the two. And I need to dig up a little more, while we're not going into that kit specifically right this instant, I need to dig up a little bit more information, if I can, on the decals that were available for modelers. Modelers, you guys may recognize as a name that made full resin kits. Like, they've done several modern resin cars here recently, 17 GTR, the newer Honda Civic, and things like that. But back in the early days of modelers, they also made a number of liveries. They made some for the M3 BMW, and they made several sheets, at least 4 that I know of, for the either the Trompio Sierra or the Texaco one, which is, you know, which is the ETCC one that's molded in black. I mean, that's the only difference between the two. One's molded in white, one's molded in black. Parts wise, they're the same content. But yeah, 1980s through the mid 1990s is really where the majority of and bulk of the stuff lies in terms of kits and decals and all sorts of things like that. So those will be more intensive videos as we go through. May do them, I'm not sure if I would do them year by year or by sort of manufacturer. Probably year by year, just because that'll be slightly easier for me to keep track of. And like I said, you guys will either join in the obsession or you'll skip over the videos because they're boring and you hate them, and we'll go from there. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys on the other side.